Hello and welcome to Bring the Fire. This week I'm joined in the studio by Raja Miah. Raja is an internationally recognised expert in tackling extremism, safeguarding children and strengthening communities. He's worked directly with world leaders, including multiple UK Prime Ministers and Secretaries of State. By the age of 30, he was awarded an MBE for his services to the community. For the last many years, Raja has been exposing the horrific actions of grooming gangs in his hometown of Oldham in Greater Manchester. Now, despite media silence and online censorship, Raja's explosive Welcome to Oldham series quickly reached an audience of over 1 million on social media alone. It's a pleasure to welcome Raja to Meet the Fire. Thank you so much for coming.
No,
really
pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
How are you? And because I've seen you on social media, you're very vocal.
Oh, I'm relentless, I think. I think,
relentless is a better word to use.
Yeah.
How has that been for you in terms of your day-to-day life? Because this is a real dark topic.
6 years.
Right.
My town, my children, as far as I'm concerned. These are my people. There's a whole host of narratives taking place. There's a fear of the extreme sort of right who want to exploit it. There's a whole bunch of Islamists who want to cover it up and manipulate it, and then a layer of politicians who are trying to make the most out of it. And at the end of the day, what we've got is several generations of children, still to this day, but several generations of survivors who were groomed and gang raped. The authorities knew about it, and to all extents and purposes, they facilitated it. It's outrageous, and the evidence is conclusive. And when I first started raising these questions, I thought it was a big mistake. I thought someone had messed up somewhere, it was a big mistake, and then it'd be fixed. And the more I looked at it, the more I realised, no, these were calculated moves by callous individuals who wanted nothing but power and were prepared to do whatever it took to advance their careers. And so what if a few, 100, few thousand, few tens of thousands, no one will tell us the figures.
No.
In terms of children were sold in the process.
It's extraordinary. I mean, you're in a position in Oldham as, an important member of the community. You've been given an OBE. How did that come about? Just first of all, before we go into this stuff, I spent
20 years, before I came to this, 20 years in public service. In my 20s, I was sat in rooms with prime ministers. I'm a northern lad who has lived experience of the communities that ended up fighting extremism, fighting terrorists, sat on government task forces. What I found in my younger days, because the world's different when you're younger, because everything's new and you're not quite sure how you fit in. What I reflect on now was very much that government doesn't have people with lived experience sat alongside them. They read books, they have policy, it's very superficial, but someone who actually understands, and also understands white working class communities in the same way as Muslim communities, they're few and far between. And people take sides. Increasingly there's this identity politics being played, and they say, well, you're this or you're that, you're something else. And no, I'm just a northern bloke, who comes from a working class town. The town raised me. I love the people. Enough people still love me despite what's happened, and I have a duty to serve them.
You're right about politics. People now, you would go from the point where you would maybe become a successful businessman within a community, and then you would elevate into...
You'd go on a journey, wouldn't you?
But now it's, I studied politics in university, and that's it.
I studied, it's PPE, so it's philosophy, politics and economics. They all do it. They all go through Oxford or Cambridge, come out, get a job as an advisor or a parliamentary assistant, and the next thing you know, they're making decisions that affect millions with no lived experience, no understanding of, what the reality of the lives of people are.
Exactly. This particular scandal, but actually, you're obviously in Oldham. I mean, we had it here. People were caught in the hotel, literally just up the road in Derby. Thankfully, a receptionist saw a young underage girl who was clearly intoxicated, with a gang of lads being ushered to a hotel room, and the receptionist didn't like what they saw and reported it, and they were all arrested. And this has happened in, I think it's 50 plus towns and cities. You said a few moments ago, they won't give you the exact numbers, but in given your research, how huge is this, do you think?
Nationally it's in the hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands of victims?
Nationally, conservative estimate 100,000 plus. Working class white children, gang raped by Pakistani men through these criminal networks, and the sinister undertones, and no one's gone there yet. It's one of the reasons why they've been desperate to shut me down, is that often the gangs themselves have direct connections with the local political infrastructure. They're protected. The police protect them, the politicians protect them. Time and time again, proven every time, the police knew and protected them, the politicians, as in the council infrastructure, knew and protected them. In Manchester, there was a grooming gang exposed a couple of years ago. It's linked to the Maggie Oliver case, a young girl called Victoria Goglia, who was overdosed on heroin, killed, in what took place. The police hid her diary, the council hid her diary. They didn't want to give it back to the family because she documents, the trauma that she's going through in this diary. And 97 taxi drivers were identified.
As being perpetrators?
Bang to rights, 97 taxi drivers. There was a meeting between the police, Greater Manchester Police, and Manchester City Council. They closed the investigation down. The minutes of the meeting disappeared. This is,
it's mind-blowing.
Yeah? Those 97 men were powerful, or some of them were definitely powerful enough for the police and the council to have enough sufficient pressure put on them where the investigation got shut down.
Why do you think that is? Because there's been a few conversations about the fact that, not just Labour, but mainly Labour, councils or whatever, they wouldn't investigate, they wouldn't do it because they were scared of being called racist and whatever. But this would suggest that actually it's more coordinated than that.
The scared of being called racist is the laziest of the excuses.
Okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and when you start to uncover what's going on, you realise that's not what's taking place. There's definitely something around community relations for them, and these are, we in our country have a perception of how successful our multicultural, multiracial system is working. The reality is, in the places where it's most challenging, it's not working. There's challenges, and we don't want to own up to those challenges. So that's why they turn their back on one reason. So in fear of community relations, how we will look if this comes out, that it's not working. So that's one of the main reasons. Another reason is the police are scared of the far right. They think there'll be a far right backlash as a consequence of stuff coming out. So the recent South Park parallels, I think, are there for all to see. But then it gets more and more sinister. Many of these grooming gang members are powerful figures in the Asian communities. They are politically connected. They are directly, the Pakistani community structure particularly is clan-based. So there's a clan system. So one has loyalty to another, covers up for another. And they control votes, block votes, thousands of votes. And after Tony Blair came in, he changed the electoral system where you could just apply for a postal vote. And the postal vote system is so easy to rig. So these men collect hundreds, thousands of votes, and votes means power.
Do you think also that maybe there's an element to it of, if these 90, was it 93? 97 taxi drivers, is there an element of maybe these taxi drivers have seen things that connect members of, whether it be the police or whether it be, members of the local governance, that actually there's almost a blackmail operation as well?
There's an interaction there. There's absolutely an interaction. These men belong to, it's essentially an organised crime group. Kemi Badenoch, I think a couple of days ago, the leader of the opposition, came out and described them as peasants and from sub-communities. Yeah, I think her term was. She's not stopped to understand, actually. She's got it very wrong.
Right.
These are sophisticated criminal organisations, and with overlapping with the police and throughout the local authority to the highest level of political representation. So for instance, in the town I came from, once the cover-up was exposed, once we exposed the cover-up and forced Andy Burnham, King of the North, portrays himself as a great, people's politician, we forced him to undertake what he called an assurance review. It was rigged from the start. So many ways it was rigged from the start. They wouldn't take the testimony that they took, they wouldn't transcribe, so the investigators took selective notes. So we'll write down what we think is important, whilst they avoided speaking to any of the victims, any of the survivors. So it's only with the intervention of Maggie Oliver that just one survivor was able to tell her story. How can you have a child sex exploitation investigation where the investigators go about their business without speaking to a single survivor?
Exactly.
Forget the politics in this. Just break it down to the bare bones of this.
Yeah.
It's rigged, and this is the Greater Manchester Mayor. This is a man who wants to be Prime Minister.
Yeah.
He's involved in rigging it. His investigators released a report. It takes them 2.5 years, 3 years to release the report. It's full of inconsistencies. There was no cover-up, is the claim. No cover-up, no cover-up, no cover-up, all the time. The terms of reference never asked them to investigate a cover-up.
Right.
So they're claiming there's no cover-up when the terms of reference of the inquiry was not to even look at whether there was a cover-up. They admitted, they found out, and I'd released this beforehand. I had a dossier of information, and I was using social media to release stuff because it quickly became apparent that whatever I handed over would just disappear.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I can't do it like that. I've got, I was entrusted with a man called Warren Bates, a councillor who passed away last year, and he handed over a dossier and said, please help us. And I remember at the time, it was 6 years ago, I remember at the time thinking, I wanted to walk away. I wanted to leave it because I knew, part of me knew this would be disastrous for my life. And it's just been awful. These people, they're cover-up merchants. And as soon as the report came out, and not one mainstream news agency will pick up on me. I'm a decorated individual. I'm legitimate. I'm not some nutcase. I'm a guy who's helped design this country's counter-terrorism strategy. That's the place I come from. And there's a document on parliamentary letterhead and Commons letterheaded paper involving Angela Rayner, now Deputy Prime Minister, Jim McMahon, Secretary of State for local government, and a woman called Debbie Abrahams, who is the chair of one of the select committees, all conspiring together to say this is the best report ever written. The claims of a cover-up are all false. It's time to move on and draw a line.
Time to move on for who?
Yeah.
The victims? I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Burnham. I've got my own beef with Burnham going back years. We had an event in Manchester, and for part of that event, we were donating money to a local homeless charity. And the man that ran that charity contacted my brother Jamie to say that Andy Burnham's office had been in touch with him to tell him not to accept the money because it would look bad on them, and basically they would be taken care of, and they never were.
So the homelessness issue in Greater Manchester, he came along. I was in Manchester at the time. Mr. Big Bollocks, he rolls this, I can fix this. In one term, I will get rid of homelessness. Never stopped to consider the complexity of the issue. Never stopped to think, actually, it isn't just about beds for people. There's a whole host of other factors.
Yeah.
Come to Manchester. It's worse than it's ever been.
I can imagine.
He doesn't stop. His arrogance is breathtaking.
Yeah.
You
see that every time he speaks. He's a very arrogant man.
Yeah.
In terms of the victims, obviously, you've got the Maggie Oliver information that came out, but I mean, over 100,000. So what was happening with people that were speaking out? Girls that would maybe tell someone, were they just being silenced?
Not just silenced. So they were being threatened by the police. There's a victim who came to me, black and white. Well, everything I say is documented. Yeah. It's publicly documented, whether I wrote it at the time or whether it's time-stamped on videos or even newspaper articles. If someone ever looked at it backwards, you'll see, actually, you can't pin me down and say I've lied on anywhere, I've made anything up. Everything is documented.
Yeah.
There was a young woman who came to me. She featured in Andy Burnham's report as a case study. Distraught. Raja, please help me. I never knew her, never met her before this. Raja, please help me. They've written all this stuff about me. It's all lies. And they've put in front of me, this is what's going in the appendices about you. I said, well, what do you want me to do? She goes, will you please get my story out? So I said, fine. Got a recorder out. I said, you talk and I'll put it out there.
Yeah.
She talked. I put it, just changed her voice, you know, so you can recognise it. Put it out there. The police turned up.
At your house?
At her house to threaten her. The police turned up to threaten her. This was the police operation. It's called Operation Sherwood. That was set up specifically after we proved that there was a cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. One of our town's children spoke out as to what horrific crimes had been done to her and how the review had, you know, hidden what had happened to her. And the police turned up to her house and threatened her.
It is extraordinary. People don't know any of this.
Yeah.
They don't. Well, why do you think, like, on a national level, I know that there's a lot of talk about it at the moment, obviously Elon Musk's, you know, tweeting about it and stuff, so it's getting a lot of, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Musk, but on this level it needs talking about, and so it's out there, and now you've got a few Tory politicians talking about it, and I'm thinking to myself, well, you did nothing for 14 years. Why do you think at the top end of government there isn't a desire to look into it?
Fear, contempt for those who are the victims.
Yeah.
You know, combination of fear as to what it'll do to the utopian vision of a multicultural, multiracial, successful, liberal Western democracy, and then also contempt to those who were the victims, because they, to all extents and purposes, go after an underclass. The white working class girls in the places I come from are treated with contempt. They're treated with contempt from every direction. So the police have a whole host of misogynistic views anyway, so it's just amplified towards these children. The middle classes that occupy some of the key prominent roles within the public services look upon them with contempt because, you know, they're better than them, and then you've got people who are from the demographic that I am, and there's no other reason, there's no other explanation. It's outright racism. It's outright prejudice towards these girls, and a belief that their culture, their faith is superior, and these individuals are subhuman and they can be treated that way, and they legitimize it that way. You know,
it is a racial thing, isn't it?
These are racially motivated crimes.
Because they are always
100%,
the same
100%.
victim.
I remember the Macpherson inquiry when it came out in under Stephen Lawrence, and there were very clear guidance as to what is a racially motivated crime, what isn't, and how to record it. Every one of these crimes was racially motivated. Not one of these crimes was recorded as racially motivated.
Because of who the victim was.
Because who the victim was, because who the perpetrators were. Yeah. It's just outrageous. But you've got victims, and I won't swear or anything, but they describe horrific exchanges with these men who were raping them. They were holding them down. And you know, it's traumatic.
Yeah.
And they were clearly racially abusing these children whilst they were gang raping them. And so why, if you're charging these, so the small number that did get charged, why is the racial aggravation factor not being added to? Shabir Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, he made reference to them as white slags and all. Yeah, they deserved it. They were prostitutes. They were asking for.
These are children.
These are children. He raped 30. Well, he was in the end convicted for 33 rapes, I think, in the end, but he raped many more. Yeah, and him and his gang, he was clearly racist. This was a guy who was clearly racist, and there was none of that. And it then came out he'd been employed by the council for 18 years in a role where he could access children. He was a prominent member of the Labour Party, so he was a Labour Party activist, a fixer in the Labour Party in the town. And he even sat on the board of the Citizens Advice Bureau. We forced out of him that police and the council missed 9 opportunities. They didn't miss them, they let him go 9 times knowing he was raping children.
And using his role within
yes.
their organisation as a means to do it.
He was selling children out of the community centre where the council hired him. He had a little black book. He was taking appointments and then arranging meetups, like in hotels like you described at the beginning.
Of these girls, what was the situation in terms of their family situation? Do you think they were targeted because essentially they didn't have a solid family background, so you know the dad and the uncle is going to turn up and sort it out? They were isolated.
There were two types of children that these gangs targeted. First was the children in care.
Right.
100% first was the children in care. The care system didn't really care about these children, and that's nothing new in the care system, in the state care system.
Yeah.
The solution Oldham Council had, and in Andy Burnham's report, it's described as an innovative solution.
Right.
Was to put all the children who were at risk of child sexual exploitation, all the children who are at risk of the rape gangs, they gathered them all up and put them together in a specific children's home and left them to it. They essentially created a children's brothel.
Now, some things are so idiotic, Raja, that I don't believe they're accidental.
No, that's not. No. So there is that demographic, and this is how we failed them. As a state, how we failed them, how we failed these children. And then there is a demographic, and this is where I find it at least as much heart-wrenching, if not more. In towns like mine, there are certain areas where communities naturally start to interact. You know, the Asian community gets bigger, the white working class community that hasn't moved on stays there, and they learn how to live alongside each other and value each other. And so what I've found in my experience is that the white working class in those areas are the least racist. They're the least racist. They have relationships, they have friendships. Yeah. And those girls, being the least racist, were exploited by young men from the Pakistani community because they became kind of like a boyfriend-girlfriend model. The parents knew about it. And they were like, no different than any two other children being a boy, Oh, so I'm not racist. I don't care if my daughter's dating this guy. He might be 2 years older, he might be 16, she might be 14, but those lads were just picking up those girls, grooming them, and then passing them on to they're no different than the street corner drug peddlers. In fact, in many instances, they were also the street corner drug peddlers.
So GB News reported 50 plus towns and cities. Now, when I hear it spoken about a lot, particularly recently, it's almost past tense. It's like, this is horrendous stuff that was going on.
No, it's still going on. Yeah. I had a direct conversation with a friend of mine, a woman I know. I've known her family forever. I've known this girl since she was a kid, now grown up, married, babies. She's got 2 teenage daughters. Had the conversation with me. She stayed at her mum's house. I'd gone to visit her mother for something. She'd been out of the country, and I just went round to say hello and see how she was. And this woman had stayed behind to chat to me. I'm like, what's up? I've not seen you for a while. I don't think you stayed behind to make me a cup of tea. And there's a reason why you're here. She goes, no, I need to talk to you. Her daughters are being groomed. Her daughters, Asian girls. So these groomers are now not just targeting white young girls, they're targeting Asian young girls, Muslim young girls, who do not conform in the dress code to the traditional Islamist way of dressing. Because this is punishment. This isn't just about, this isn't even paedophilia. This is something else. It's about power, it's about punishment. This is about outright racism. You're less than us, so we can rape you, we can abuse you. And that is taking place. That conversation was in December. The council got involved. The council wanted to put this safeguarding structure on her. She refused. She said, listen, go and arrest them, guys who are doing it. Go and arrest the guys who are doing it. Here is the phone numbers of some of them texting my teenage daughters, underage daughters. Here is what's going on. Police turned around and said, you need to go and gather more evidence.
That's your job, mate.
Yeah. And that was December.
So this is still going on.
This is 100% still going on.
It seems to me like there's almost, from their point of view, from
they've got away with it forever.
Yeah,
why would they stop?
They're becoming emboldened, aren't they?
Why would they stop? They've got away with it forever. They know they are protected. They know that the politicians rely on their uncles and their fathers to provide them with the votes. They know they belong to organised crime gangs that have access to the highest level of power in the town. And every town will be the same. In one way or another, every town will be the same. So we've got councillors, Asian councillors, Pakistani councillors, Bangladeshi councillors, doesn't matter. We've got Asian councillors whose immediate family member, I can go and point out, is a convicted drug dealer. Consistently. Another one, a businessman. It's that triangulation. Here we've got a politician, here we've got a drug dealer, and here we've got a legitimate businessman, and we clean our money that way. Yeah? And the girls, these children, for many of them is no different than drugs. The trafficking, yeah? And every time you hear about people being arrested and convicted, it's either the groomers or the immediate network of the traffickers who are
it's the
convicted.
low-lying
Yeah?
fruit.
Yeah?
It's not the big guy.
It's not the big guys. And at the other end, not a single customer, is convicted. The hotel you talked about, what would have happened there is they would have had a booking system of like 50 men, 100 men who would have paid beforehand and come through. Not one of those men ever gets convicted. This is cultural. It's ingrained in the community that I come from. It's disgusting, and it has to be stopped. And it needs courage to do it.
What do we do about it as a population? Because it's pretty obvious that the establishment and all those systems like the police force that are supposed to be in place to do it aren't going to do anything. Now, I've got Muslim friends that are outraged by this.
Yeah, I'm outraged.
And you're
Look at me.
exposing it.
Look at me. I'm outraged.
So what do we do you think, as a society, across all racial, religious, whatever, that are so outraged by this? Because the majority of this country, the overwhelming majority, will be outraged.
100%. And that's why I don't buy into they've rigged the system in such a way where they present it as though the white people who object are the racists.
Yeah.
And the Muslims, and the Asians, like, oh, you need to be careful and not say anything, otherwise they'll blame all of you. That's not how any of us are working here. We're saying, grab hold of the guys who are doing it, put them in prison.
Yeah.
Get hold of the politicians who are covering it up, put them in prison.
100%.
And all the staff who failed them, sack them.
100%.
It's not complicated. None of this is complicated. And we forced the fallout in January, early on this month.
Yeah.
When Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding Children, sent a letter back to my town saying she's not going to safeguard children. It's just...
Well, explain that, because for me, like, my experience of Jess Phillips is there's not an issue there's not something horrific enough that could happen to someone else that isn't more important than Jess Phillips' feelings, basically. Yeah. So when I saw this all coming out about the grooming gangs and the horror of it, suddenly Jess Phillips was sat there saying, oh, my life's hell as a result. And I was thinking, it's not about you, Jess.
I wanted to shake her. Well, actually worse at that way. What happened there was she helped facilitate it. It's now become a cover-up. It's now become a political cover-up where as soon as they do the right thing, politicians will fall. This goes we've evidenced it. It goes all the way up to the Deputy Prime Minister. It incriminates the Greater Manchester Mayor. It incriminates 2 MPs in my own town. Can you imagine how many more it incriminates across the country?
Yeah.
This government will fall. And I think if we have a duty, it's not to let them manipulate us and say, oh no, we'll do an inquiry, we'll do this, we'll do that. These children deserve justice. And what we should do and what we can do is continue to speak about it to each other and to speak out about it and let them call us racist and far right. Since when was protecting children racist and far right?
Exactly. And just because someone calls you something doesn't mean it's true. And at the end of the day, if my choice is to be silent about what's happening to these girls or be called far right, I'll be far right.
I'll be far right every day. Every day.
Doesn't bother me.
Every day I'll be far right. And in the end, what happened with how we got here is at every stage we've been fighting the government. We've been fighting the system. They've repeatedly arrested me, mate. Repeatedly dawn raided my house, arrested me, marched me off.
For what? What
They just made stuff up. Apparently I was a racist. I'd said something to a council leader in the past. I objected. So the council leader in my town is a woman called Arud Shah. All of this is documented fact, which is why I'm comfortable saying this. She hangs off the arm of a guy called Irish Imi, who is the convicted getaway driver of the cop killer Dale Cregan. So one of the most highest members of an organised crime network, convicted heroin dealer as well, lifetime of crime, she hangs off his arm, takes him to the council meetings, takes him to the counts. And I said, this is outrageous. She was celebrating an election win with a guy called Zia Hussein. Red Labour Party rosettes on releasing the photographs. He was convicted for kidnapping a young man, torturing him, and using broomsticks and stuff to insert into him.
What?
The police turned up and found blood splattered all over the walls. And this is not just the leader of the council, this is how bad the situation is in our government. She is the chair of the National Constitutional Committee of the Labour Party. It's a powerful committee. She's the chair of that National Constitutional Committee.
How are these people not rounded up and sent to jail?
This is...
Well, I know the answer to that. It's a rhetorical question.
Because they're connected. So the police, the gangsters, you talked about earlier with the 97, the police, the gangsters and the politicians are all connected. We've been calling for years in my time for the central government to come in and take over the town because it's rotten. And one way in which that manifests itself is in the grooming and gang rape of children, because to a lot of them, it's worth millions. It's money, it's worth a lot of money.
Of course. What's so crazy to me is if I was looking at politicians as genuinely good people, which of course I don't, but let's pretend for 5 minutes that they are. If you're at the national level, if I was Prime Minister now, I would be looking at it and I'd be thinking, do you know what, we're sat on a powder keg here. If we don't arrest these people and we don't put a stop to this, then actually the British people, because actually they're fundamentally good people, they will rise up eventually.
Where else is this going? When they're dragging our children off the streets and gang raping them in exchange, or allowing people to gang rape them in exchange for the votes that they need to stay in power. This is crazy.
It's from a horror film.
Yeah, this is, and every day I look at this and I'm like, I look at myself in the mirror and I think, are you sure about this? And I am. I've spent enough time analysing documents at the highest level of government, looking at, dangers around extremism and stuff and where the threats are coming from. And I'm looking at this and thinking, no, not only is this an organised network, our leaders, our political leaders, the political establishment are involved. Now, some might be unwittingly involved, like I think Jess Phillips signed that, not really thinking what was going on and not understanding the scale of the cover-up. But so she gets incriminated. Oh, what happened to me? Or someone sent a nasty tweet about me.
Yeah, it could be worse. You could be a victim of a grooming gang, Jess.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. I find it extraordinary that there's so much silence from so many quarters. And it's not just the political side, because I expect silence from them, but even in huge swathes of the media.
Let me give you an example. I put a post out there and I said, I'm begging any of the mainstream media outlets, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky News, what's the other one, GB, I even put GB News in the Talk, whatever. Any of you contact me and I will share everything I have. Any of you contact me, I'll share everything I have. Not only did none of them contact me, the one that did contact me was GB News. They cancelled on me. They cancelled on me.
That doesn't surprise me.
And it's clear to me that there's other games being played.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's good people at GB News. And I'll give you an example. I was invited to go on and do an interview on GB News. And when I was asked, I replied saying, you do know that they'll never have me on.
Yeah.
And the lady said, no, we want you on. I went, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I was due to go on the Sunday now in London. And on the Saturday, I walked from Chesterfield to Sheffield. It was a fair walk, and got a hotel with a mate, and we had a few beers. Because I knew as soon as they advertised that I was on, the hierarchy would be straight on the phone.
Yeah.
And do you know what? They put on social media that I was going on the Sunday, and I went, give it to me. Honestly, less than 10 minutes. I got a phone call. Oh, sorry, they've double booked. No, they haven't.
No, you haven't. Yes. No, you've got a phone call.
Yeah, and that's what they've done with you,
yeah,
clearly.
Absolutely, that's what they've done. Which is why I now speak to anyone. It's a pleasure to speak to you, But I will happily speak to anyone. I was in a hotel room last night with some young people from a very right-leaning political persuasion, and it's no problem. I'll speak with anyone. I think what, and then I challenge the worldviews of some people, because hold on, there's a guy who looks like this, who talks like this, and what's his agenda here? No, he wants to look after children. Yeah. And if I'm selfish in it, I've got a 10-year-old daughter. Yeah. I've got skin in the game. It's my town, and I've got a child.
Yeah, and the thing for me, when people link it to religion, that annoys me a bit, because that's not why these men are doing what they're doing. It's nothing to do with faith.
No, and people forever have used elements of whatever doctrine they want to try and legitimize their evil acts. Yeah. And it's not just with this. It's happened forever, and it'll continue to happen forever. And I look at this and I think, no, listen, we have got to intervene. We've got to strengthen our democratic systems. Otherwise, where does it go? Yeah. Otherwise, people say, well, why do you campaign? Why aren't you on the streets? I said, because I believe in democracy. I've worked in places where democracy is broken down. Where does it go? It doesn't go anywhere. The people who are suffering aren't in a better position when democracy breaks down. They're in a worse position more often than not. And I look at it and I think, okay, we campaign, we vote, we hold our politicians to account, and we try and elect better leaders. And can we do that? I don't know. I look at all of the political parties, and this is a political football, isn't it? Yeah. I want to think they're genuine. The ones who are speaking out. The Conservatives knew about it for years.
14 years of government did nothing.
The local Conservatives in my town, to their credit, wrote to the government begging them to intervene. They wrote back and said, no, you've got to write to us in the proper way.
What's that even mean?
The council's got to write to us rather than you directly as Conservative councillors.
So the council that's complicit in it have got to write to you and tell you?
So it took us 5 years. It took us 5 years to remove, get enough numbers of opposition councillors to get the council to write to them. Come on, your children are being gang raped, and you say no, you've come in through the wrong door. Go back out and come in.
It's extraordinary, and time is so important because every day that's stalled is another day that this happens to some poor soul.
And it's another day when I'd say another huge sway of the people in our country gets even more disillusioned with government, and there'll be no coming back from this. No. They voted last week against an inquiry into the cover-up of the gang rape of our nation's children. Our government blocked an inquiry into the cover-up of the gang rape of our nation's children. I mean, just step
you
back.
Saying it out loud, do you know what I mean? Yeah. It just makes you go, hang on, sorry, say that again. Yeah. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Why would you do that? Yeah. Unless you're a complete psychopath, you're guilty, or you're complicit in it, at least. Yeah. How do you see it ending in the end? Because part of me, I'm a tinfoil hat wearer, so part of me thinks that actually at the top end they kind of quite like the division, and they would quite like the Muslim community pitched against.
They want that. Yeah. They want that. Keir Starmer, as soon as he came in as Prime Minister, actively manipulated the situation for that. So when the horrific incidents took place in Southport, he immediately started talking about the need to safeguard the Muslim community. He played that. He created that scenario that led to the attack on the Southport Mosque. Yeah. There's another game being played underneath this, which is in the lead up to the general election. The Labour Party lost a lot of support in the Muslim communities over the position in Gaza. Yeah. Yeah. Right or wrong, they lost a lot of support over the position in Gaza. So they now need the Muslim vote back on side. Traditionally, over 90% of Muslims vote Labour. And in these red wall areas, I say the red wall is held up by the green mortar of Islam. If you go and look at like Bradford and places like that, they're not Labour just because they're all Labour. There's a Muslim cohort that keeps them in place. And they need that support back. And the way to get that support back is to say, look, those white people are going to come and hurt you. If we don't take care of you, those white people are going to come and hurt you. And that's the strategy of the Labour Party right now in this country, is to create that divide so they can shore up the bloc Muslim vote again. Because they know the angry white vote, they've lost. My grandfather might have voted Labour, but they've lost that.
Yeah, they've lost it. Yeah, 100%. Because obviously you're a community leader, so you talk to people from all different demographics. What is the overwhelming kind of thing you're hearing from all of them?
Sadness. Complete dejection, sadness. Some are angry, but sadness. Who wants? My town is a small town, and they've manipulated the situation where a lot of the Asians now, they consider me a far right activist. They've released information online in partnership with the council and the police, all complicit, that I'm a gay Christian convert. Put a picture of the front door of my house, publish my address online, and
which is illegal to dox someone like that.
Police are complicit in it. I was on bail at the time. The police then changed my bail conditions to put me under house arrest that night. So I had to stay in a house. That was targeted, very clearly targeted. Barricaded myself in every night. And my daughter was, I think, 6 or 7 at the time, slept with a knife next to us. It was just, they're complicit. And it encourages that. So the criminal element, it encourages the criminal element. And because people, not everyone will speak out, will they? No. The majority won't speak out. They'll look at this and think, what on earth? I'm keeping my head down.
Yeah.
So the majority are petrified of speaking out. Doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, if you're white, the majority are petrified. And what's taking place in Oldham is identical in towns and cities where there's this similar demographic and similar, political infrastructure in place.
So how do you think it ends? Because it must end. This can't go on. Full stop. So it must end somehow. It's just how that happens.
They've got to go to prison. They've got to go to prison. Because prison shows that we do not tolerate that kind of behaviour.
No.
Yeah, so the politicians have got to go to prison. And I'm openly naming the politicians, which is why they won't have me on any of these national... I'm openly naming the politicians.
Yeah.
The Labour Party have tried to sue me and they ran away. I told them I'd sue them in the High Court. Nothing else came back.
But if you've got the receipts, then...
Yeah. I can see it. I've produced the evidence. Like, there you go. What is that? You get your civil servants along to try and bamboozle people, but people aren't stupid. That's the thing. They take us for fools. We're not fools. In fact, more and more people, more than ever before, are questioning the information that they're given rather than just blindly accepting it.
Yeah. Do you know what I thought was perfect evidence of that? Because the tweet you spoke about earlier, where you said, "Please, I've got all this evidence to the mainstream media." I saw that tweet, and I replied to it. But what I found interesting was no one was tagging mainstream media outlets underneath it. I got tagged. Unity News Network were getting tagged.
I saw it.
Because people know that actually the mainstream media is not going to touch this. Yeah. And so it's got to come from the ground up.
And this isn't new for us. If you're a student of history, you'll remember when the Chartists first came around and they created those penny pamphlets. Because back in the day, they'd get information out to the working classes who'd learned to read on these penny pamphlets. And what the government did was put a tariff on those pamphlets to make it so that the ordinary person could no longer afford to access the pamphlets. And they put an entire generation of radical campaigners in the 18th, 19th century in prison for daring to say we should have the votes the same as anyone else.
Yeah, but in the end...
We won. In the end,
and I believe, Raj, honestly, in the end...
we'll win. We'll win, but because this is right.
Well, that's the thing. If you're what you are campaigning for is just and right, in the end, you will get there. It might be spicy at times, but you'll get there.
And let it be spicy.
Yeah.
I mean, short of killing me, what more can they do to me? Let it be spicy. They've spent years trying to put me in prison.
I admire your courage, Raj. I really do.
No, pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Where can people at home keep up with what you're doing? Because obviously your research is ongoing all the time.
I'm on X. I think Twitter, the X platform is the best. Recusant Raja is the, and I use the word recusant because it means people who refuse to bow down to authority, specifically when that authority is unjust. It's a historical word from our history books.
Yeah, and it's beautifully apt. Raja.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much for everyone at home for tuning in. We'll see you next Sunday when we will be bringing the fire yet again. Have a great day. Next week on Bring the Fire, I'll be joined by former British MP Andrew Bridgen. We speak about his life in politics and the realities of what really goes on behind the doors of Parliament. Who's really making the decisions that affect your lives? Check out the episode next Sunday at 10 a.m. UK on ickonic.com.